Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here. So, not too long ago, I uploaded a video going over the top 10 fights in the Asia Circuit arc of the Vanguard anime. That video ended up doing pretty well, nothing big statistics wise, but folks seemed to enjoy it well enough, and requested that I continue the series, so here we are. However, not too many people actually suggested a season to do, so I decided to stick with the less popular seasons available and talk about Legion Mate. That's right, Legion Mate. That one weird kid in the back of the classroom that seems to be the middle child between the end of the OG series and the start of G. Not a lot of people talk about this one, and you know what? It's kind of for good reason. It's not a landmark season by any means, and didn't even get voiced in English, so filthy dub watchers like myself were a little thrown off. On top of that, the season itself is rather strange, but with Aichi being the tragic pseudo-antagonist sealed on the moon, that's right, the moon. And Kai is the born-again protagonist of the season, having to save his friend, or perhaps love interest, with the power of Nakama. With a description like that, I doubt I need to tell you that this was a strange fourth season that got a mixed reaction from the community and remains in this nebulous space between mediocre and avant-garde, ultimately damning it to be, again, the weird one in the classroom, whom no one seems to be 100% on their opinion about it. That said, the season was still pretty entertaining, and despite its flaws in terms of plot and character management, actually had some cool fights that tend to get left out in the discussion. So in today's video, I'm going to go through what I believe to be among the best fights in the season and analyze what exactly made them good to begin with. And trust me, this season was a bit surprising, so buckle up, kiddos. Before we begin though, let's set a couple ground rules for the video. Of course, only card fights that took place during the season are eligible. Furthermore, said card fights need to have been on screen, so no fights mentioned offhandedly. Finally, this is a ranking based on personal preference and will take a lot of factors into consideration rather than just, oh, simple fight action. With that said, let's delve into the list. I hope you enjoy. Number 10. Starting out the list, we have a fight that many people probably forgot even happened, which was Naoki vs. Leon. Taking place during episode 178, this game was relatively short but really exciting to watch. Naoki had been struggling with his training at Leon Soryu's private island, that's right, his private island, before coming to a moment of clarity regarding his fighting style. This quickly emboldened him to challenge Leon to a card fight, which he accepted without hesitation. The fight turned out to be pretty solid in retrospect, with both players whipping out their powerful legions against each other and trading blow for blow. Naoki applies an important lesson here, as he starts to adapt to Leon's style and disrupts his field rather than just going on an all-out attack. That was pretty genuine growth from Naoki and would lay the foundation for his awesome performance later in the season. Sadly though, Naoki would go on to lose the fight anyway, but given how freakishly strong Leon was, this felt very realistic, so I appreciated that they didn't just give him the win. Regardless, this was an awesome showing for Naoki and made the excursion to the Soryu Island feel like a necessary detour in the story that developed our cast of characters, especially Kai and Naoki. The only real things holding it back are that the fight is pretty short and it's somewhat overshadowed by other Naoki fights. Overall though, it may only take number 10, but this is still a fight worth rewatching. Number 9. Heading into number 9 spot, we have another fight that's somewhat overlooked, that being Philip vs. Aichi, which occurred from episodes 186 through 187. What made this fight worthy of being on the list is twofold. First off, the surprise factor of Aichi suddenly popping up was pretty shocking and definitely made the scenario interesting, as the whole point of the season up until this point, well, for the Quattro Knights anyway, was keeping him sealed. The series gave a pretty clear impression that if Aichi ever got loose, then it would be basically game over for the whole world, if not the universe. So seeing him just walk up on Philip was pretty scary. This leads me to the second reason, which is Philip himself. Philip handles himself excellently in this situation, standing up to the possessed Aichi and battling him back with everything he's got. Although the fear on his man's face is apparent, Philip still does everything he can to repel his friend. And can I just say that this was a struggle. Aichi is a monster in this battle, playing Link Joker on a level like no other and smashing Philip almost effortlessly. And to be frank, the matchup was tricky, as Corden mentions how the locked rear guards would stifle Philip's ability to power up the Vanguard, which is practically a death sentence for Metalborgs. Still though, Philip puts up a great fight until the end, pushing Aichi enough to where his words could reach the boy. Despite losing the battle, Philip knocks some sense into his friend, which is the real win here. And the scene where he, battered and beaten, carries Aichi back into his throne is a fantastic moment. Super picturesque and symbolic. Really, the fight is super underrated and 100% deserves a spot on this list. Number 8. So at number 8 is one of the more memorable fights of the season, ironically perhaps, which is Kote versus Rachi. Going down during episode 172, this fight is unlike the previous ones in that people do tend to remember it, but it's really only for one reason, and that is Greater Dai Kai Za. Okay, so clearly I have a bit of bias for this battle, but then why, pray tell, is it so low? Well, to be completely honest, there's not really any big reason. The fight just always seemed fairly mid outside of Kote being cool as hell, right? In other words, there's only one reason why it's even on the list. And yeah, that's enough to get you onto the list, which is low-key funny, but considering that the next fights are dominated by Kai fights, it's not going to reach much higher than this. Having said that, the fight action was okay, but felt a bit tutorial-y. That is to say, it was so focused on the introduction of both decks and characters, reintroduction for Kote that is, that the game feels a bit slow and bogged down by commentary. Then again, both D-Robos and Witches have pretty sweet Legion mechanics, so seeing them in action is pretty cool, so yeah, 8th place is a fine position for this fight. Number 7. Okay, so I said that the next fights were dominated by Kai, but there's one more non-Kai fight that I felt was worthy of this list, and that's Olivier versus Sarah. Right off the bat, I may or may not have some explaining to do here. The reason why this is number 7 is straight up because of its conclusion, which finally puts an end to Raul Serra. Why is this so important? Well, aside from him being the villain of the arc, he's also a pretty bad character. That's right, I'm gonna be straight up. Sarah's a bastard. So here's my Sarah rant. At first, he seemed kind of cool, what with his cool and somewhat mysterious demeanor. Then things fall apart on the moon, man. His sudden twist of secretly plotting against Aichi came out of nowhere, and yet somehow also feels super predictable. Seriously, the guy had zero build-up as a villain, and when he does start being Mr. Bad Guy, he immediately loses whatever flavor he previously had. On top of all this, you guys remember the reason why he suddenly did all of that? I certainly didn't at first, and only remembered when I reviewed the series for this video. So what was his reason? Why? World domination, of course. No cap, man, the dude goes on a speech about how he's the best there ever was and thus deserved to rule over the world with Link Joker. In addition to be as cliche as humanly possible, it's also really stupid because the dude wants to rule and terrorize the world despite fully understanding that Link Joker functions to eradicate all life in the universe. It is a goddamn apocalypse, Sarah. What the hell were you planning on doing after that, huh? Sip tea and some smoke and ruins as the last man on Earth? It's just so dumb and underwhelming, and I wanted this stupid smug bastard to finally get slapped. And thankfully, Olivier delivered. Aside from my hate boner for Raul, Olivier does make this fight fairly good to watch. He tends to be a pretty noteworthy character, and watching his deck's mechanics of calling allies struggle with Link Joker's lock is neat. But of course, the best moment is when Raul, after having laughed off Prominence Glaire's attack is weak, is eventually unable to guard the thing and gets his ass beat due to the guard restricts. Afterwards, he's kicked out from Aichi's private moon mansion thingy, which, not gonna lie, feels a bit too lenient a punishment, but hey, as long as he doesn't come back, I'm happy. So yeah, petty agenda aside, Olivier's redemption and ability to fight through and put an end to Sarah is a solid game, and even without personal vendettas would still deserve a spot on this list. Number 6. Continuing the Sarah beatdown, we come to number 6, which is Naoki versus Sarah. So, most of what I said about Sarah in the previous entry applies to this fight, though granted it does require a bit of retrospect, as Sarah wasn't revealed to be the BBBEG, aka the big bad evil guy, until a bit after. That said, the reason why this spot takes the spot above Olivier's fight is simply because Naoki here is more engaging to watch and root for. Up until this point, the kid had a pretty rocky road, suffering defeat along the journey, yet passionately fighting to reach Aichi. And to that end, this fight feels immensely gratifying as Naoki finally gets a big W against one of the knights and does so in classic Naoki fashion, with passion and emotion. To be straight with y'all, this fight is more Naoki good stuff and feels like a major moment for his character, so there's significance in this fight that way. Plus, it's the only fight where Pinot Noir, my favorite Grand Blue unit of all time, is played. A plus in my book. Man, I just realized this, kind of off script, but the only thing about Sarah that I ever even freaking liked is the decks he played. Musketeers, Kina Noir, and Dark Zodiac are all awesome Vanguards, yet they have to be played by Mother effing Sarah. Anyway, yeah, this fight is very nice and takes number 6. Number 5. Time for the Cardfights. Kicking off the top half of the list, we have Kai versus Ren round 3. So right away, a fight between Kai and Ren would seem like a gamebuster battle. And yeah, this fight is definitely good. But it's also without a doubt their weakest one. The card fight begins due to Kai asking Ren where he can look for Aichi, with Ren refusing to do so unless Kai beats him in a card fight to prove his resolve to brave the path forward. The action is pretty solid, and seeing the Abyss Legion pair was a straight-up fangirl moment for me as a Revenger's main. Hell, it's kind of ironic seeing this matchup as Thing Saver has to fight Phantom Blaster Abyss, despite them two together forming the most notorious meta deck of the Legion era. Funny, right? Yeah, anyway, Kai does his duty as the protagonist and gives the obligatory friendship speech before beating Ren. However, what's interesting about this fight is that upon closer examination, it comes to light that Ren probably threw this fight on purpose. See, prior to Thing Saver's final swing, the audience gets a view of Ren's hand, and it's actually pretty good. There's enough shield to block the attack, plus an RPBA for next turn. Although depending on Kai's drives, the rear guards could have broken through. Despite that, Ren straight up didn't guard because he already determined that Kai had the strength to push forward in the journey, so he didn't even bother trying to win. That's a nice touch, not just to give Ren fanboys a way to feel okay about the result, mind you, but also because it maintains focus on the point of the fight to begin with, something that tends to be thrown out of the window sometimes in a card game anime, LOL. Anyway, this game is solid and is 5th on the list. Number 4. Want to hear a fun fact? Kamui beat Kai one time. Shocking, right? For those of you who didn't know, or don't remember somehow, Kai and Kamui had a fight partway through the season. The premise was that Kai was getting really afraid and disheartened after him and his Nakama got pummeled by the Knights. As a result, Kai wanted to leave the group and search for Aichi on his own. Kamui was having none of this, and challenged Kai to a game to make him realize that they were still worth something and deserved to search for Aichi too. And Kamui's win here was thematically beautiful, passionately defeating Kai and proving to him the power of friends, which correlated to him restanding his rears to push his offense, the reason Kai lost. This is brilliant. It feels very well deserved and is arguably Kamui's biggest win in the original series, straight up. What's funny about this is that the characters themselves also know how momentous this is, stating prior that Kamui had never before beaten Kai in a game. And when he does, Kamui doesn't even childishly revel in it like you would expect. Instead, he openly admits that Kai is the vanguard and he and his friends are his rear guards, which is a huge moment of growth and maturity for our boy. Really, it's a solid fight with a momentous occasion, more than worried of being number 4. Number 3. Taking the bronze is one of the most iconic fights of the season, which is Olivier vs. Kai round 2. Before we get into this amazing fight though, let me be transparent about something. This fight was almost number 1. Same goes to the number 2 fight. So although it's only 3rd place, it's basically by a hair or two, so let's just acknowledge that the top 3 are in their own group almost, and stand a fair bit ahead of the rest of the pack. That said, let's talk a bit more about this fight. Straight away, in order for this to have been a round 2, there has to have been a round 1, which, funnily enough, was also almost in the top 10 as well, albeit near the bottom. I digress though. Round 1 was basically a wake-up call for Kai as he gets manhandled by Olivier and sets him back on his journey. Seeing him burn from Olivier's bluish flames of judgment was shocking and legit traumatized the man. Seeing Kai so vulnerable and having to seize his inner resolve to move forward was a treat to see and gave us a reason to root for him. But why am I going into all of this, you may ask? Well, that's because context is the big reason why this fight lands itself in the big 3. After all, round 2 is the triumphant moment where Kai is finally able to break through the obstacle that is Olivier and prove himself worthy of seeking Aichi. But of course, there's a lot more to love here. Not only is the back and forth action really solid and engaging, getting to see Kai debut his Kagero deck and the Verdanttax Legion pair was a sight to behold, and really felt like the rebirth, pun intended, of the legendary duelist Toshiki Kai. Oh, and Trinity Crimson Flame! Sorry about that, had to do it. One particular element I especially loved here was how, as opposed to the first match where Olivier's flame burned Kai, it's now Kai's flames of intensity that are overpowering Olivier's resolve. The reversal, man, another pun. Anyway, the reversal of this dynamic is super satisfying and sets Olivier on the path to redemption. In fact, his backstory and connection to Aichi didn't feel like a slog to get through and was fairly interesting, so even the extraneous elements that usually bog down a game weren't bad here. All in all, it's hard to find a flaw with this card fight. It only nails the bronze because the other two games are just that good. Number 2. The runner-up spot goes to the match many might have expected to be number 1, and that's Kai versus Aichi. As the season finale battle, this game was already going to be pretty noteworthy, as most are. However, as a Kai versus Aichi battle, this was already going to be a great game. And it did not disappoint. Here it is, the big payoff. The final battle to decide the fate of Kai, Aichi, and the world. The battle begins on a somber note, with two friends forced to do battle over their incompatible visions. The air is tense as Aichi, possessed by Link Joker, is a powerful adversary who could potentially unleash the apocalypse itself at any given moment. And as the characters make their final remarks, this epic battle begins. And right away it starts off strong. Both players are quick and aggressive with their turns, so much so that the peanut gallery even remarks as such. Aichi is brutal and swift with his attacks, but Kai doesn't give an inch and holds his ground. Then come the big moments as Kai rides his avatar, Dragonic Overlodo, Zagreto, only for Aichi to do the same with the horrifying and shocking Blaster Joker. Then commences a dance of will, as Aichi performs his absolute lock and break to stop Kai dead in his tracks, only for Kai to advance each and every time, by constantly rewriting the great. In a pivotal moment, Kai figures out the solution to Aichi's suffering, and sets him free with burning resolve and the power of friendship. So I decided to give a brief rundown of the fight, as it sort of explains on its own why I love this fight. It's epic, of course, but also somehow both iconic and unique. After all, this is Kai versus Aichi, a battle that has occurred many times before, but this time things are warped as Aichi plays Link Joker and, in turn, the role of the villain, whereas Kai must take up the mantle Aichi left as hope to combat this. It's a great dynamic for Legion Mate, which truly shines in this game. However, there's more to it. After all, the fight action, music quality, and commentary are all handled very well here, and add to the immersion of the match. It's dark and tense, dude, with the outcome uncertain as Link Joker itself stood as an inevitable force that, regardless of the result, continues to remain. In this way, there's a great feeling of despair that is pervasive in the game, and Aichi himself pushes this hopelessness onto Kai in the hopes of making him realize the folly of his ways. I think the key units here are brilliant from a thematic standpoint. Dragonic Overlord the Great not only embodies Kai's fiery ambition, but his companionship with Neoflame, which has both stand again, is a very reminiscent of Kai and his Nakama, relying on one another to stand as a group. Blaster Joker also holds a lot of symbolic value, as it, along with Photon, which Korn considered to be her avatar at this point, constantly do everything in their power to hold this force at bay. That's interpreted well by the gameplay mechanic of the absolute lock and break, which even makes a reference to absolute zero temperatures in which all matter is still. The only way past this is with substantial heat, which is exactly what Kai's Fire Resolve does as he keeps rewriting the Great to burn past his endless chill. It really can't be understated how well this fight comes out within Legion Mate. The only reason why it's in number 1 is that the next fight is simply that amazing and is still my favorite of the season. And although this battle is incredible, I find it to be rather similar to the Season 3 finale battle, albeit with the roles reversed, but that game is a bit better than this one in my opinion, so I find myself comparing to it. Even so, Kai vs. Aichi is a fantastically written bout with equal parts action and symbolism, propelling it to the second best card fight on this list. Number 1. Number 1 is Kai vs. Olivier round 3. Yep, no flowery wordplay or prefix needed, just gonna say it as fact. Man, this fight is peak Legion Mate. Let me start with the only thing that I think is a bit off with the fight, which is that a third round seems a little much in the first place, especially since round 2 was just a handful of episodes prior. But you know what? I don't care, man, because this fight slaps. Plus, it doesn't have totally superfluous feelings to it, as it really gives Gaillard a chance to shine one last time and redeem the honor of the Quattro Knights, giving them a sort of ceremonial hurrah before the final battle. In fact, although this is debatable, I've always viewed this match as the Yu-Gi-Oh!-esque ceremonial battle, which, for those of you who watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Know, comes before or after the final boss battle. And man, this fight achieves that in spades. The action is straight up the best the season has to offer, not gonna lie. The back and forth between Gar and Kai is awesome, lets both characters shine. Music is well placed, and hell, the commentary from the peanut gallery is nice and adds to the fight somehow. On top of that, this is the fight which introduces the Chad himself, Dragonic Overlord Zagreto. My butchered pronunciation aside, this was a jaw-dropping moment and could potentially be the most hype unit reveal the entire freaking season. Although that's also debatable, of course. Looking at you, Blaster Joker. It's simply the kind of landmark gangbuster fight you'd imagine taking the top spot of a list like this. As aforementioned, the previous two fights were both hot contenders for the gold, but ultimately this battle just had the sort of secret sauce for being the special, memorable one. Of course, though, my favorite part of this fight had to go to the fact that the writers simply did not hold back. Seriously, dudes, these guys must have woke up and chose violence or something, because the insanity of this battle was off the chain, yo. Let's just break it down here.
I'm going to have to put on my fucking double-seeing glasses because I can't even begin to see the amount of bullshit coming from you.
Boy, that sure is a lot of triggers, huh? In fact, I believe it's the most amount of triggers checked in any game of Vanguard, period. On top of that, seeing them just ride up and slam each other with their units is fast and exciting. Gaiard go from Percival to Prominence Gutter, whereas Kai ascends from Vortex Dragon Newt into the Great, and the two just... it's just the best, dude. Oh, and who can forget the momentous final scene where Kai and Aichi approach each other to battle as the triumphant music sounds in the background. It's simply the best, man, and takes its place as the king of fights in all of Legion, mate. And that was the list. Overall, I'd say Legion Mate was a pretty mixed season. On one hand, you get great fights like the ones on this list, which stand as gems in the anime's history. However, much more of the season is rather clumsy and forgettable. Heck, half of the fights on this list were Kai fights, who was a big part in making those games great to begin with. The point here being that many of the characters weren't that great. And not just new characters like Philip and Sarah, but even pre-existing characters like Misaki and Miwa. See, in the case of Misaki, Miwa, and even Kamui, their characters were pretty much cucked as they received little fights and were quickly removed from the final confrontation on the moon, leaving their contribution and character arcs painfully unresolved. As for the Quattro Knights, excluding Olivier, we get a cast that had potentially, but ultimately failed to make the mark, as these guys, again, excluding Olivier, didn't receive enough time to develop their characters or get good fights that could have done so it's squander potential there. The plot also suffered in some areas beyond the characters, as the continuity of the anime and lore is a bit screwy. Plus, Kai's protagonist role is a neat twist, but the theme of Nakama that he champions is a supremely cliche anime trope. Leon and Ren were also a bit off, as although they did well when it came to their dialogue and the fights that they had were being, pretty damn badass. Hell, they both appeared on this list, in fact. I feel they were underutilized in the grand scheme of things and could have participated a little more. This goes especially for Ren, who only battles once and does nothing else, but either gives a little info or comments on things. Leon is a bit better due to helping the gang train, but even he could have stood to participate more in the final battle. Then again, given what happened to most of the main group, they might have just been shipped off with amnesia as well, huh? LOL. All in all, the season is fine and worth rewatching, I'd say, even if only for the highlights. Overall, its quality is definitely lower than many other seasons of the Vanguard anime. I still respect it for what it tried to do, and found it fairly entertaining overall. Having said all that, do let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Did you guys like the list, or are there ways I can improve? Also, I'm hoping to start on the next top 10 video, but haven't picked a season yet, so suggestions are definitely welcome. And if you like this kind of content, then subscribe to the channel and check out my other videos. I do discussion videos like this, fight nights, tier lists, and more. And with that, take care, God bless.